Navigating the global geopolitical landscape is tough. If you're a mid-sized country, you really only have two choices when dealing with world's reigning superpower. You can be America's enemy or you can be America's friend. Now, being America's enemy sounds terrifying. You get the economic sanctions package, the occasional drone overhead, and your regime might suddenly experience a sudden involuntary career change. But according to Henry Kissinger, a man who treated global map like a game of risk played on a casino floor, the other option might actually be worse. Think about it. When you sign up to be primary ally of Washington, you aren't just signing a security treaty. You are purchasing a premium subscription to the American foreign policy roller coaster. And historically speaking, the ride almost always ends with the safety bar lifting while the coaster is upside down. Today, we are looking at why hosting a US military base is less like buying a security system and more like inviting John Wick to stay in your guest bedroom. It sounds great for serenity until you realize his enemies are now looking through your windows. Let's look at the customer reviews for the American Friendship Guarantee. Exhibit A, South Vietnam 1973. Washington promised an ironclad commitment to protect Saigon, but after a few years of domestic protests and bad press, the US signed the Paris Peace Accords, packed up their helicopters, and just left. When the aid dried up, the regime collapsed, leaving millions of local allies holding a metaphorical bag that was rapidly filling with hostile forces. Exhibit B, the Kurds. The Kurdish people have the unique geopolitical distinction of being America's favorite emergency contact. Whenever there's a crisis in the Middle East, Washington dials the Kurds. In the 1970s, the US used them against Saddam Hussein. Then Iran and Iraq signed a border treaty and the US abruptly pulled their funding. When asked why they left their allies to be crushed, Kissinger beautifully summarized the vibe by saying, "Covert action should not be confused with missionary work." Translation, "Thanks for the help, we are unfriending you now." Fast forward to 2019. The Syrian Kurds did the heavy lifting to dismantle ISIS. But the moment political winds shifted in Washington, the US pulled its troops from the border, leaving the exact same Kurds perfectly exposed to a Turkish military offensive. And of course, who could forget Afghanistan in 2021? 20 years of nation building, trillion-dollar promises, and endless speeches about democracy. Then, over a single weekend, the entire apparatus packed up in the middle of the night, leaving tens of thousands of local interpreters and allies trying to catch a flight by clinging on to the outside of a C-17 cargo plane. 5 stars would be recommended. Now, some people will argue, but wait, what about Israel? Surely that's a friendship that defies the Kissinger curse. Well, let's peel back the layers of what international relations scholars call the asymmetric codependency. Because even here, the fatal nature of the friendship is starting to show its teeth. Israel's entire defense architecture is deeply integrated with Washington. Billions in annual military financing, advanced hardware, precision munitions. On paper, it looks like ultimate security. In reality, it's a structural trap because Israel relies almost exclusively on American tech. Washington holds the ultimate remote control. During a prolonged conflict, Israel doesn't just need American political support, it needs radical logistical resupply. Tank shells, Iron Dome interceptor missiles, smart bombs, so on and so forth. If a US president faces domestic political pressure and decides to slow walk a cargo ship full of ammunition, Israel's operational capability hits a wall within a week. The alliance has effectively stripped Israel of its independent logistical sovereignty. And then there's the mismatch in existential stakes. For Israel, regional conflicts are a matter of literal survival. For United States, the Middle East is just one annoying square on a global chessboard where real opponents are Russia and China. Washington doesn't want a massive regional war because it disrupts global markets and ruins the pivot to Asia. So when Israel moves to secure its border, it finds itself constantly micromanaged by a superpower patron that treats its existential realities like an inconvenient line item in a budget debate. This brings us to the broader neighborhood of West Asia and the Gulf. For decades, the deal between Washington and Gulf capitals was simple. Give us your oil, let us park our military in your backyard, and we will protect you from the bad guys. But let's be entirely honest about what a superpower base actually does. Americans don't build massive military installations like Al Udeid in Qatar, Fifth Fleet Base in Bahrain, out of the goodness of their hearts. They build them to project power, control international shipping chokes like the Strait of Hormuz and protect their own economic interests. And hosting these bases introduces a phenomenon we like to call the target mirror effect. If you don't have a US base on your land, you are just a country minding your business. The moment you let Washington build a runway and parking spaces for stealth bombers, your soil becomes prime piece of real estate on every adversary's target list. If Washington picks a fight with a regional power, guess where the retaliatory drones and ballistic missiles are landing? Not in Washington, D.C. They're landing in your backyard. You're providing the shield, but your house is the one getting dented. And what happens when the protection racket fails? In 2019, drone strikes knocked out half of Saudi Arabia's oil production overnight. The World Health, its breath, waiting for the massive American security umbrella to open up and retaliate. What did Washington do? They sent a strongly worded tweet and suggested Saudis buy more air defense systems. The message was crystal clear. The US will fight to the last drop of your blood to protect their interest, but the moment the cost outweighs the benefits, you are on your own. So, what happens when the entire world realizes that being America's best friend is a health hazard? You stop playing the game. Right now, across West Asia, nations are quietly hitting the unfriend button on unilateral American dependence. They aren't turning into enemies, they are doing something far more terrifying to Washington. They are diversifying. Instead of relying on a single volatile superpower whose policy changes every 4 years based on election cycles, regional leaders are building a multipolar insurance policy. They are repairing diplomatic ties internally, like Saudi Iran, detente mediated by China. Because turns out talking to your neighbor is cheaper than buying a Patriot missile battery. They're joining economic blocs like the BRICS to bypass US dollar, ensuring that Washington can't turn off their economies with a single banking sanction. And they are purchasing weapons from France, South Korea, China. Because having multiple keys to your gun cabinet is safer than letting Washington hold the only one. Lord Palmerston, a 19th century British Prime Minister, once said that nations have no permanent allies, only permanent interests. When you align yourself with a global superpower, you aren't entering a brotherhood. You are entering an asymmetric transaction. To the smaller nation, the alliance is an existential matter of survival. To the superpower, you are just a pawn on the global chessboard. And when the game changes, pawns get sacrificed to protect the king. So if a superpower turns up at your doorstep offering eternal friendship, a massive loan, and a brand new military base, you might want to read the fine print. because the subscription fee is cheap, but the cancellation policy is absolute murder. So, after mentioning all the historical evidence that is there, I'm sure you can draw your own conclusions in present day circumstances, especially in West Asia. Until next time, keep things clearly ambiguous. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe and share it with at least one more friend.